Greetings everybody around the world. It's time once again for Ancient Aliens Radio. This is the dedicated radio show for the cast of Ancient Aliens. Here we interview authors and researchers as an ongoing investigation into the ancient alien theory. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or subscribe to the YouTube channel Ancient Aliens Radio. This is your host James, and I'm delighted to have my returning guest and returning friend Robert Bauval on the show today. And we have a new scandal. If we didn't get over the last scandal, we have another one, and it's quite shocking. It's quite shocking that I'm back here with Robert. But Robert's in the limelight, and he's in the firing range 24/7. So, without further ado, let's bring on our guest for today. Hi, Robert. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, hi. It's nice to be back on your show.
I wish we had a better circumstance to talk, Robert, but you know, I gotta talk about this, Robert. Like I said off air, but just for the audience, I watched The Universe, Robert, and season 8, episode 2, they're going on about the pyramids and an Orion constellation, and I'm like, yes, Robert Bauval's coming on the screen, and you never appeared, Robert, and this guy, Edwin Krupp, comes on, and I couldn't actually believe what I was watching, Robert. I couldn't believe it. Now, but there's a very complicated story behind all this, Robert, and a couple of days later we spoke then, and you know, in a way, I'm sad that this has come around full circle again, Robert. This is an old story being recycled again. And you know, you must be scratching your head going, Robert, not again. You must be.
Well, you know, I've developed a kind of rhinoceros skin over the years. I mean, the Orion Mystery was published in '94, as you know, by Random House, and there was a BBC documentary, and it received a lot of publicity. A lot of people don't know that the Orion Mystery, in fact, was published much earlier by me in an academic paper in 1989. So, you know, it's got quite a lot of history behind it.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, this is an old scandal that has been rehashed, and I'll tell you why. And quite frankly, it's time that, you know, like we say in the business, to stop pussyfooting and really expose this matter, because a lot of people don't know the background behind this.
Well, I actually did know a little bit of the background. I just didn't know that it applied again. I didn't know what was the old story. And I recognized Edwin Krupp from something. And like we discussed, Robert, again, we're going to bring in CSICOPs. We're going to talk about that foundation. We're going to talk about the motives of what these guys are actually doing, because it's very clandestine, Robert, and very surreptitious. And I think a nasty agenda is on the cards. And it's quite apparent when you expose who these people are, what they're doing, and what their motives are, Robert. And it's not a very, very nice thing that they're doing. However, let's build a picture for what's actually happening here, Robert. And again, this is all hinged around this resurfacing of Edwin Krupp on the History, is it the History Channel? It's the Universe, History Channel's Universe, season 8, episode 2.
Well, let me tell you what is happening at the moment. I mean, as you know, I've decided with Dr. Robert Schoch to cooperate in writing a book together.
Sure.
This book is titled Sphinx, The Search for the Origins of Civilization. And the idea, well, as I've known Robert Schoch for many, many years, since the early 90s. For those who are unaware of his work, Robert Schoch is the man who used geology to argue an earlier date for the Sphinx, along with John West in the early 90s. And he, like me, at the same time, I was quite independently arguing an earlier date for the Sphinx using astronomy. And both of us independently have since then, for the last 20 years, received the brunt of academic anger about this. You know, that we were upsetting the paradigm. We were going against the status quo. But the theories were sound, and I presume that this is one of the main reasons why a lot of people were upset. But, you know, we've been through it, and there's been all sorts of attacks and conferences and you name it, and particularly with Dr. Hawass, you know the whole story. A lot of people are quite familiar with this. But recently, while in the process of writing this book, I got contacted by two astrophysicists in Italy. Mm-hmm. Two from the University of Italy, one of the main universities. Dr. Vincenzo Rofino, who's a well-known astrophysicist, and his colleague, let me remember his name, Paolo Bernardino. You can check them out. They're well-known. And they decided to do something that no one had done before. You know,
sure.
One thing that again, you may not be aware of this, but my work and my books have been particularly popular in Italy. Mainly because I speak Italian and I could go there and give conferences and appeared many times on television there. And they noticed, being academics themselves, that all they were hearing from the academics in criticism were very subjective. You know, this is a crazy theory, the man is a charlatan, pseudoscience, the usual thing. And they, quite unbiased, said, okay, the only way to go about any theory is to test it properly.
Mm-hmm. Not to use the word pseudoscience, because pseudoscience is again a label, and they use that as
there is pseudoscience theories. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't, but
they use
quite
that.
Frankly, the Orion mystery is based on astronomy.
Yeah.
So is Schoch's work. You know, it's based on proper geology, and you know, it took into account the context of the fourth dynasty. You know, the pyramid text, as you know. Where the king wants to go to these particular stars after he dies, the shafts in the Great Pyramid, you know, everything was in the right context, and the theory was well presented in an academic journal. It was presented in a book, The Orion Mystery, and on many other things, on television and so forth. So these two Italian scientists thought, okay, well, what needs to be done, as we do it for any theory, is to pass it through the mill. The test mill, and what is normally done is to pass it through what they call a quantitative analysis, looking at the measurements, all the factors that can be measured, you know, the intensity of the stars and the size of the pyramids and so forth.
Sure.
And then pass it through a proper statistical analysis. And they use the method called the Monte Carlo method, and they did so. And lo and behold, they concluded that the theory could not be falsified. That's all you can do with a test like this. In other words, that the theory stands the test and therefore must be taken into serious account, whether they like it or not. And so they wrote a paper and sent it around. And that's the reason why they got in touch with me, because the paper kept getting rejected by various scientific journals. And they couldn't understand it. I mean, their work was very scientific. They had done a very, very good job, gone through all sorts of details and charts and you name it. And they couldn't understand this rejection. Besides that, the rejection that they kept getting were from anonymous, because the peer reviewers of journals are not revealed to the writers of articles, but the comments are sent to them, and the comments were rather bizarre. You know, again, the old subjective thing. You know, this theory is crazy.
I never knew that. I never knew that, Robert. That there's anonymity behind the review process.
Yeah, let me just go, because finally they contacted me because they wanted to know, well, why is this happening? So I said, you know, I'm not surprised at all. I told them, you know, I've been earmarked, if you like, on the hit list of many skeptical organizations, and I know that many of these journals, unfortunately, have reviewers that belong to these organizations, and there's a kind of cabal, if you like, not to allow any support for these theories like mine and Robert Schoch, because if they do, it will give credence and it will upset the paradigm of academics, you know, and they don't want this. So they said, well, let us send you the remarks of the peer reviewers, and finally I said, well, do you know any of them? They said, well, we suspect because we nominated a couple of peer reviewers ourselves for the paper, because sometimes the journal, because the subject is so special, they ask the authors of the paper to nominate people they know who can act as peer reviewers, as referees. So they nominated quite innocently 2 archaeoastronomers. One of them is an Italian professor at Milan Polytechnic called Giulio Malli. And the minute he told me this, I said, well, I'm not surprised at all. I've known Giulio Malli for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And I think you may recall this. We had a talk about this, Jane.
Yep.
But last year, there was a bit of a scandal as well, because Giulio Malli took some of my work. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go in detail, but it concerned the city of Alexandria and the alignment of the city.
Yep.
And quite simply plagiarized my work and published an article in the Journal of Archaeology of the Oxford University. Yeah, I got to know about this, and I complained to the journal, who were particularly shocked about this, and forced Mr. Malli to make a public amends, and they had to republish a statement accordingly in the journal. It was a very embarrassing thing for the journal and for Dr. Malli. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised that he would definitely be the very last referee to use on anything to do with my work. And the other one was an astronomer, archaeoastronomer from the Tenerife Observatory, a gentleman called Dr. Juan Belmonte, who also, believe it or not, had appropriated some of my work to put in his books without referring to me. And quite frankly, I finally said enough's enough. I've been very tolerant about all this, but...
You've been very tolerant, Robert.
Well, so has Shock, by the way. I mean, Shock is a very, very tolerant man. But, there comes a point where you have to say, enough's enough. This has gone too far. And we're going to fight back. And this is what we're doing with this new book. But let me tell you this, that a lot of people don't know the very origins of a problem that surprisingly has its origins in England just a few months before I published The Orion Mystery. Do we have time to go through this?
Oh, please, Robert. We've got as much time as you need for this. This is important, Robert.
Well, this is fun. I mean, I'll tell you something. Are you
referring to the Horizon scandal?
That's right, yes.
Yeah, I remember.
It has an origin that has nothing to do with Horizon. Let me go through this. But let me say, because while I was talking to you, I remember a very, very amusing phrase that I was told by, unfortunately, the late, she died a few years ago, Dr. Mary Brooke, who was the astronomer at Edinburgh University. Mm-hmm. And she was quite an eminent astronomer. She was the wife of Herman Brooke, the astronomer royal for Scotland. We got to be very friendly in the 90s when I published. She was very interested in my work. And whilst I was being attacked left, right, and center, she phoned me up one day and said, "Robert, but all this is in good fun, She's right, I mean, you have to take it in that stride.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That was good advice, Robert. That was good advice.
Well, you have to, because...
Can I just say, Robert, I remember the Horizon scandal, the BBC scandal, with respect to what we're going to speak about. And it kind of twigged then when I had the conversation with you who this Edwin Crook guy is. But to get into the background, I mean, just going back to that time frame, Robert, that was a serious thing that the BBC did. And we're going to lay out that whole background because it's important, because this is where the cycle repeats. And there was a victory for you guys in the end. And I know Hancock was involved, and that's how I remember it, because it was on Hancock's page and his forum.
Still is, by the way.
And still is, by the way, if anybody wants to check this out. So you can go to grahamhancock.com and you'll just put in BBC Horizon scandal. And, victory to you guys, because you guys really were, had they have won, Robert, had they have won, the tables could have been very much against you, a lot worse. Not that you guys did anything wrong. I mean, you guys stood up against the big boys and had a small little David and Goliath victory, back then, I'm talking. But yeah, I remember it all, Robert, as it happened. I remember it all.
Yeah. What I was saying is that at the time, we're talking about 1999, when this Horizon scandal blew up, what we weren't familiar with, which I'm about to tell you, is that there is a background to this that needs to be understood. A few months before I published The Orion Mystery in 94, the Orion Mystery was published in February 94. A few months before, the British media had been involved in a rather peculiar scandal. This concerned a biologist, a rather famous biologist, called Rupert Sheldrake.
Oh, yeah.
Rupert Sheldrake proposed in a book that he published the theory of morphic resonance.
Morphic resonance. I have a copy on the shelf there. It's a good book, actually.
It is, yes.
I like it.
It's a very interesting theory, but I don't want to go into that here. But nonetheless, who took particular offense to Sheldrake's work was the editor of probably the most prestigious scientific journal, Nature. You know, Nature. And he wrote an editorial which really shocked the free thinkers and the media at the time. The title of the editorial says it all. Should this book be burnt? You know. So, and he goes on in this editorial using words like heretic and the book should be treated like we treated Galileo, you know, and that kind of nonsense. So of course the British media started saying, well, this sounds a bit like the Spanish Inquisition, you know. I mean, we don't burn books these days, and besides, we're dealing with a proper scientific theory proposed. It's still a theory, but you know, it merits to be looked at rather than being insulted this way. Well, all this was happening while I innocently was about to publish The Orion Mystery. I had no idea about this. And of course, when The Orion Mystery was published, boy, hell broke loose, because the BBC decided to do a documentary. On this documentary were very, very eminent and distinguished scholars. There was Sir Ivan Edwards, who was very supportive of the theory at the time. There was Dr. Mary Brooke. There was the astronomer Virginia Trimble. There was the curator of the British Museum Egyptian Department, Vivian Davis. There was even the director of antiquities of Egypt, not Hawass at the time, a fellow called Ali Hassan. And what came out of this documentary is the BBC was extremely positive about it. It was shown on prime time on Saturday night at 9 o'clock with a lot of publicity for the show. It was on the Radio Times front cover, you know. So, you know, innocently, there it goes, and with this big media, and of course, it attracts the attention of the skeptics. And you can imagine, after the Rupert Sheldrake scandal, the scientific journals did not take kindly to what they perceived to be a pseudo-scientific theory, you know, somebody coming out of the woodwork like me, you know, and coming up with this correlation theory. And given the kind of support and publicity that it got on the BBC program, let alone coming out in a book published by Random House, you know, and #1 bestseller.
Which is a big publisher, which is a very big
You can imagine that a lot of ruffled feathers in academia began to sort of plan how to stop this.
Sure.
Now, what made it worse, what made it a lot worse, was that a few months later, Graham Hancock publishes Fingerprints of the Gods.
Fingerprints of the God comes out then, and all hell breaks loose then.
And then hell breaks loose even more in the media, in the British media. And really comes now the last straw on all this is that Graham and I get together and we publish Keeper of Genesis, which was a huge success. I mean, this was a #1 bestseller in Sunday Times. There was again television documentaries, reviews in the top papers. So that was it. You know, little did we know that these academic skeptics were fuming. And in, I think it was September 1996.
Just to pause for a second there, Robert, I think it was the collaboration between you guys writing a book together as well, which they didn't like, because at that time there wasn't a lot of people collaborating their efforts. There wasn't a concerted effort. A lot of people were coming up with alternative theories, but you guys with Fingerprints of the Gods and the Orion mystery, and then collaborating for Keepers of Genesis, that looked like a concerted effort by two major research topics, and it looked like this was a dangerous approach towards them.
Yes. Seen from the skeptics.
Yes, exactly.
These sort of what I call the ultra skeptics.
The ultra student, yeah.
Yes, seen from their point of view. I mean, this was the worst of pseudoscience. But what really got them wasn't the fact that to them it was pseudoscientific. What really got them was that the media was giving these theories huge attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that the books, this was unknown in this kind of genre books. I mean, for them to be number one bestsellers in the hardback non-fiction of the Sunday Times, for the BBC to air programs about these theories, this was very unknown. And therefore, one can see them fuming and not liking it at all. So, in any case, unknown to us, in New York took place the so-called first World Council of Skeptics. It was organized by the famous skeptical organization CSICOP.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard of CSICOP, I'm sure.
Nasty bunch of people, fanatical extremists. Right?
Yeah, let me tell you a bit of background here. I mean, CSICOP was created, I think, in the early 70s by a group of skeptics, mostly academics from various academic establishments, and also from editors of top media, Scientific American and Nature and various others.
Dennis Rollins was one of the big guys there.
Yes, well, let me tell you about Dennis Rollins because I got to know him. I suppose one can understand a bit. There was a lot of nonsense being said in various books, in America especially, about UFOs and alien abduction. But, a lot of people felt justified to publish. Some were serious, some were not serious. But anyway, they gave themselves the mission to debunk these so-called pseudoscientific theories, and also to somehow make sure that they don't get the media attention, especially in what they consider to be the serious media, the scientific journals and the national television and so forth. So during this Congress, this first Congress, Sir John Maddox, who had attacked Sheldrake a few years before, went to this Congress and proposed to CSICOP that they should form a new body, which they called the Council of Media Integrity. And this council was, again, recruiting top media people with the intention to literally stop the publication or the exposure of these pseudoscientific theories, or if they do get exposed, to debunk them in the media, big time. Who joined this organization was the man you were talking about, Dr. Ed Krupp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, even though Krupp was aware of the Orion correlation since 1994, surprisingly, after joining this Council of Media Integrity, came his first open public attack. He published a very, very derogatory article in Sky and Telescope, a very well-known, popular astronomical journal in America, which gets published around the world, by the way, with the title Pyramid Marketing Scheme. There you are, so you can tell from the title. Basically, and bluntly, Krupp said that I had put the map of Egypt upside down to make the Orion correlation work.
Wow.
And I thought, my God, this, especially coming from him, he was the director of the, and still is, by the way, the director of the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. Why is he saying that? I mean, frankly, at first, I couldn't understand why he was saying this. I won't go into the nitty-gritties of it, but it didn't really have the effect that CSICOP presumably wanted. Not many people read this journal, and that was it. So frankly, I let it go. Where it really came to a head was in '99, a few years later.
Yeah.
And here is the beginning of the Horizon scandal. Graham Hancock contacted me saying that he had been contacted by the BBC Horizon program and that they wanted to do a two-part program called Atlantis. The first one was called Atlantis Uncovered, and the other one was going to be called Atlantis Reborn. And they were going to review his work. He was very happy with it. It was going to be very good publicity for him. But they had asked if also I could be on the show to present the Orion correlation theory, which was quite a linchpin to to Hancock's work. The Hancock was arguing, as you know, the existence of a proto-civilization, prehistoric civilization, and the Orion mystery, because and of course Schock's work as well, because it gave scientific support to the existence of some activity in ancient Egypt and elsewhere. So I said, fine, put them in touch with me. And so he did. And I got contacted by the producer, a fellow called Chris Hale, who said, yeah.
Did you feel at that moment, Robert, there was anything going to be...
No. I mean, I felt, I'm a bit wary if you do it with other television networks, especially commercial television networks, I don't know, Discovery, History, that might put you out of context but when it comes to the BBC, it's something else, because you may or may not know, but the BBC, apart from being an extremely serious network, are under charter.
Yep.
They have a charter that they have to adhere to. And this charter, particularly when it comes to scientific programs like Horizon and Everyman and all these Panorama,
they get scrutinized.
They have to.
They get scrutinized. They get scrutinized, Robert, for the broadcast.
No. Well, yes, the charter says that they have to present a fair argument from both sides. If they're going to attack a theory, then they have to allow the person who presented the theory to defend himself, and to give a counter argument or bring people who have a different view. This is the right way to do it. In any case, I felt very comfortable, actually. I accepted, and they flew me to Cairo, and they interviewed me at the pyramids, asking me about the Orion correlation. But then the producer said, listen, we want to be very fair on this. We also have Dr. Krupp on the program, and he says that you put maps upside down, so we're going to allow him to say this, but what is your response? So I said, well, let me give you my response, and I went through a whole explanation where this was a bit weird for him to say. Basically, let me just cover this. Krupp was saying that if you looked at the picture of Orion's belt in the book, and if you look at the picture of the three pyramids, the top of the picture of the pyramids is pointing south, with the small pyramids of Menkaura, and the top of the picture of Orion's belt is pointing north. Now, why is it pointing north, according to Ed Krupp? Because if you look at Orion's belt, you're looking south, as you're looking at the pyramid south, but if you draw a line from the top star above your head and spin it over your head, and you could say, hand on heart, that it points behind you to the north. So, of course, I laughed at it. I said, this is not the way even astronomers will present star charts. So it's ridiculous. But anyway, let me give you my response. And I did. And that was it. I think it was in July. I can't remember exactly when. And finally, the program was announced to be aired. I think it was aired on the 7th, I can't remember, on the 7th of November or the 4th of November, 99. And Graham called me up and said, "Oh, the program is coming on, let's watch." And we watch, and, sure enough, they show Ed Krupp saying his upside down theory, and I wait for them to show me, and it doesn't happen.
Wow.
So there it is, Ed Krupp saying I put maps upside down, totally unchallenged, and they don't show my part. So of course there was a huge uproar. I mean, I remember the next day my phone didn't stop ringing. I mean, I even got calls from my lawyer saying, "This is crazy. What are you going to do about it? The BBC has broken its chart." So finally, Graham and I decided, well, look, this has gone too far. We're going to take the matter to the Broadcasting Standards Commission, which are the watchdog for this kind of problems. And sure enough, what really prompted the Broadcasting Standards Commission at the time, not just because the BBC had broken its obligation from its standard chart, but because they got to know that Ed Krupp belonged to this skeptical organization, which should never be allowed on these kind of programs. And on top of that they had received many, many complaints from top astronomers in the UK saying this was a scandal. It should never have been allowed. That this is not how astronomers would, in any case, definitely not how the ancient Egyptians would be expected to reproduce Orion's belt on the ground. This was total nonsense. And they had letters from very prominent astronomers. You're still there, by the way.
I'm listening, Robert. I'm attentive. I remembered at that time, Robert, even watching the original episode, it didn't seem fair to me, Robert. It just was. I was actually in my maybe 16, 17, Robert. No, maybe closer to 20. And I never felt that whole thing was going to be fair when I started watching the first 10 minutes.
No. Let's face it. It was a hatchet job. And, but, even a hatchet job, you expect it to be properly done.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a one-way attack. And, there was no, and of course it was edited, with intention to debunk. I mean, you could very clearly see it.
Yeah.
But, the trouble is that a lot of people watching these shows are not aware of the background, and, they accept what is being shown.
Yeah.
But anyway, coming back to this, one of the most strong complaint came from Dr. Archie Roy from Edinburgh University. Archie Roy was, unfortunately, died a few years ago too. He was a very, very prominent astronomer in the UK, and he was furious. He knew me, and he knew the theory very well, and he wrote an open letter to the BBC saying that what Krupp had said was very wrong, and he rebutted all these accusations and so forth. Who also complained was Dr. Mary Brooke and the famous astrophysicist Chandra Wickramasinghe, who was really furious because he felt not only that this was totally unfair, but that it was annoying that the academic world could not accept that somebody outside the academia could come up with a proper theory and make sense. There was this kind of...
How arrogant.
Well, believe me, it's true.
Yeah.
So that's the background. And, I'm frankly going to expose all this in much greater detail with documents and so forth in the book I'm doing with Schock, because, Schock received his fair share of this kind of nonsense as well. As you know, he's a professor of geology with tenure at Boston University. He's a very serious academic. But when he came up with the theory, and a very proper theory, very well studied, that the Sphinx was much older, looked at from a geological point of view, not only this was in parallel to the astronomical theory that I had presented.
Mm-hmm. Robert, pause there for a moment. So the very thing you're going to expose is that these actual scientists, the ones that are involved in this story, are actually using unorthodox methods and sometimes blatantly lying and going against the
no, frankly, I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's one of those peculiar things
tactics.
about,
maybe to say using tactics that are
yes,
against their own science.
But let me give the, I suppose, the psychological aspect to this. I mean, it's one of those strange things, but there are people, especially in these circles, who truly believe that they are right. That's it. I mean, they believe that they are the custodians of knowledge, a bit like the church was in the Middle Ages, and that anything that is threatening the paradigm, the status quo, their own view of what the truth is, will be considered heretic. I mean, it sounds crazy, but
they get extremely defensive. I think the point I was trying to make is, Robert, that the so-called scientific people in this case are being unscientific.
Well, there was the case of CSICOP in the 70s, involving a French psychologist, Paul Gauguin. Paul Gauguin, a very serious psychologist in France, decided to write a paper. And in this paper, he wanted to review scientifically, using statistics, that's how you review a theory, about astrology. There was, many people were claiming that, it's known as the Mars effect. They were claiming that people born under the sign of, under the influence of the planet Mars were very good at sports. Statistically, people were claiming that this was true. So he decided to do his own statistics and see what the results would be. In other words, to try and falsify the theory. This is the right word. But when he did the statistics, he found that he couldn't falsify it. The statistics, whether he liked it or not, supported the theory. So he wrote a paper. And who took particular offense to this at the time was CSICOP. And they were absolutely convinced. This is the funny thing about this sort of church of knowledge, if you like, if you want to call it that. They were absolutely convinced that these statistics were faulty, that it was not possible that you could support statistically such ideas in astrology. So they employed one of their statisticians, a mathematician and astronomer called Dennis Rawlins, who also said, yeah, let me test this statistically, and I'll use the same data as Paul Gauguin did. And they were all convinced that it was going to be falsified. Well, lo and behold, it wasn't. The statistics confirmed that the theory was valid. And they didn't like it at all. What they did at the time was to kind of nudge and wink at Dennis Rawlings and saying, can you doctor the statistics to make the theory falsified? And he, of course, refused. So when he refused, they gave him the boot. They fired him. And he went to the media and exposed all this. So you can see they went, I don't know if you remember the spoon bender,
Uri
Geller.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to know a lot of people in this business, but I got to know Uri Geller in the late 90s.
Really?
We became quite good friends. And he told me too that he had been hounded for years by CSICOP. For years.
Wow.
And they accused him of all sorts of things. And so.
Where is he at these days? Where is Uri Geller at, Robert?
I think he's still in England now. He had a house in, near Reading, if I recall.
Yeah, I think
he used to be the neighbor of George Harrison. There you are. I recall.
Really?
Yes, he was very friendly with George Harrison.
You get to know some people, Robert, I tell you.
He's quite a character. I liked Uri Geller. I mean, he was very, very unusual man. Of course, I'm skeptical about what he was doing, but let me tell you, he did this demonstration before my eyes, and believe me, I could not, for the life of me, find any fault in it. I mean, although my mind wanted to reject it, because that's what, you want to do, and yet I could see him bending those spoons right in front of my eyes.
Wow.
So, I have to give him credit. If it's a trick, it's a damn good trick. So. But anyway, there you are. He was one of the victims, and God knows how many others, but I think it's enough's enough. I mean, people have a right to publish proper scientific theories, or any other theory if it's well done. I'm not suggesting that people publish any old rubbish. They can do so, but not in the academic journals.
But Robert, sorry, I want to come back to the Universe Season 8, Episode 2. Should they not have had you on there, Robert, at the very least, in fairness?
Yeah, they should have, and they should have at least, if not have me on it, at least have been the acknowledgements. I mean, it's as if I didn't exist.
Yeah,
but you
really.
know, I'm used to that too. I mean, you know, the Orion mystery, since many years, has a life of its own. I mean, it's almost like it's a different entity to me now. I mean, it's
grown up, it's grown and evolved.
Well, just Google it, you'll see it's over nearly 300,000-400,000 websites, you know, it's, God knows how many TV documentaries, and frankly, I've lost count. I mean, I get phone calls saying, oh, I've seen you on TV, you know, and I've seen an article about the Orion, and I just don't react anymore because it's taken a life of its own. That's the right, it's gone viral, if you like.
Viral, yeah.
And, that's it. So I accept this. But, you know, in academia, there's a very strange phenomenon as well. I mean, people, you know, what happens to a theory if it resists the onslaught of attack? Slowly, it begins to be talked about. And slowly, academics begin to talk about it. And strange enough, they talk about it as if it's their own, if you like. It's no more, they don't talk about you anymore. And gradually it gets absorbed in the academic circle as if it's always been part of it.
Exactly what you said there, right? There's a resistance and then there's an absorption. It's a strange process that academia goes through with theories, but that is it. You pointed at the two things there, Robert. There's a resistance.
No, it's very well known, this. I mean, I'm not the first one to go through this process. I mean, but you accept this. I mean, frankly, I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
I mean, they can go and talk about it or criticize it or attack it or approve it. It's out there. It's finished. I've done my work.
Robert,
what I won't accept, and this is why I'm talking to you now, is when these two Italian scientists, Dr. Rufino and his colleague, contacted me and told me what they were going through. That is what I won't accept. And this is why I'm coming out again, because it shouldn't happen. That paper should be published. I've seen the paper. It's on the internet, by the way.
Yeah.
I'll send you the link if you want to put it on your,
yeah, I'm going to actually put a link in the YouTube description so the listeners can actually look at this paper and maybe get a bit of press on this, Robert, as well. So if all the listeners want to go to the YouTube description when you're listening to this on YouTube, you just click on the link that I provide there.
Look, they did what, frankly, should have been done a long time ago. They did the quantitative and statistical tests that should be done on any field. They did it. And the results are positive. The results are good. And therefore, not only because I'm the originator of the theory, but it's good for the advancement of science. Because if this theory is correct, if the Orion correlation theory is correct, it has a huge implication to what we know about the ancient Egyptians. In fact, what we know about the ancient world. You know, we're looking at something very, very different than what Egyptologists have been saying over the years. So this is what is at cause here. And it should be given the right airing in the right papers so that it progresses. This is how we advance knowledge rather than obstruct it. You know, this is the process. Anyway, there you are. I wanted to vent all this with you. And, but you know, I'm sure Graham Hancock and John West and Robert Schoch, they're all timers at this. They would agree with me. I mean, we have gone through all this many, many times. You know, they used to call us the fourth horsemen of the apocalypse, if you remember. I mean,
you have gone through the mill, as we say, Robert. You have gone through the mill.
Well, at first we used to get very upset, you know, and Graham, I remember Graham when the Sunday Times did the front cover in their cultural magazine, really insulting his publication of Fingerprints of the Gods. I mean, he was furious, absolutely furious, and was very depressed. But I said to him, you know, look, because I've been through it before, and I said, listen, you have to take these bullets, because if what you're saying is correct, it doesn't, you know, one of the real things about truth is that truth is not democratic. You don't vote truth. You know, it's not like the process of democracy. Truth is truth. And if one person is right, if what he's saying is true, like Galileo or Kepler or all these people who have been ostracized by their peers, then it doesn't matter if you bring 1,000. It doesn't matter if you bring the whole world opposing it.
I have on my YouTube channel, Truth Has No Agenda, Robert. But it doesn't. Truth has no agenda. It's not democratic. It's truth is truth, Robert. Exactly. It's such an important point.
I mean, you know, it will be opposed. I mean, it will be opposed. This is the natural tendency of human nature. You know, people are still opposing the heliocentric theory, believe it or not, in Saudi Arabia, for example. It will be opposed. But if it is falsifiable, if it stands the test, if it is then eventually proved, that's it. It doesn't matter how many people contradict it. And this is where the Orion correlation stands. You know, believe me, I've heard it from A to Z. You know, I've been through it and I know that this is where it stands. I mean, if it was wrong, as some claim, then after 25 years, believe me, it's been available to every single university, academic, whoever wants to tear it apart. And they haven't been able to knock it down. They have been able to insult it. They have been able to say maps are upside down. They have been able to bring up finicky arguments, you know, the intensity of the star and this, but the theory stands because the theory fits the context. You know, I think I've used the term, it's the Cinderella shoe of Egyptology.
Oh, I've mentioned this before. I mean, these guys were obsessed with the Orion constellation and Osiris, so it's not, the context is also there. It's not just astronomy, but that's icing on the cake as such.
No, come on. You know, the pyramid texts clearly indicate that the pharaohs believed that their afterlife was in the stars.
Yeah.
And particularly the stars of Orion.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a shaft in the Great Pyramid pointing to Orion's belt.
Yeah.
The pyramids are astronomically aligned. Some of the pyramids have star names. 2 pyramids of the 4th dynasty. The pyramids are at a diagonal next to the Milky Way. Next to the Nile. When you look at the image of the sky, you find that the 3 stars of Orion belt have exactly the same pattern with the same little offset that the 3rd star, the less bright star has. You can see that they are set in the sky relative to the Milky Way as the pyramids are on the ground. It all tallies. It fits exactly what the Egyptians say that they wanted to do for their land, to build heaven on earth. They believed the land was a cosmic land. They believed the land was a replica of the celestial realm, and this is what they did.
For the posterity of the listeners, Robert, can you go back to the Horizon and tell us the outcome of the Horizon scandal? Because this was, I mentioned there was a victory with that, and then I'm going to bring it back into Edwin Cup and maybe wrap it up with that. But go back and tell us about the victorious outcome of the BBC Horizon scandal.
I don't want to make it sound as victorious. What was presented was a series of complaints. The major one was this upside down. I'm looking at it now.
Well, it was victorious for the truth, Robert. It was victorious for the truth, I should say.
Here is the statement, and this was put in the Times. This is just an abbreviation of the statement, the summary, but it says, and I'm reading from the Times. I've got the clipping here. It says, the Commission considered that the program makers had acted in good faith, giving Mr. Bauval and Mr. Hancock a fair opportunity to explain their fears, with one exception. And here, I don't know how they acted in good faith with one exception, but there you are. So they say, fair opportunity to comment on, with one exception, fair opportunity to comment on criticism. I mean, that's the whole exception. Anyway, it says, therefore, the Commission did not uphold most part of the complaints. However, it found that the program omission of Mr. Hancock's and Bauval's response to criticism of one important aspect of their theory, which related to a correlation between the Giza pyramids and the Orion constellation, has been unfair. Well, that's to put it very mildly. The BBC, frankly, did not act in good faith. This was a setup from the very beginning. They know it. We know it. The Commission knew it, but they got off kind of lightly on this one. And to be sure, they never repeated it again. You know, it was a terrible mistake to do it the way they did it, frankly. I mean, I was surprised because I knew the BBC very well, by the way, James.
Yeah.
I had worked with them before and I trusted them implicitly. I mean, I had no problem with them at all. I mean,
well, they're respectable compared to a lot of other networks.
Yeah, but this time they employed outsiders.
Yeah.
A fellow called Chris Hale and a young producer, I can't remember his name. And it was these two who, you see, what had happened, just to wrap it up, when the Orion mystery came out a couple of years before, and when the BBC did a very favorable program, it was called The Great Pyramid Gateway to the Stars. This was supporting my work. It was very popular. Show that was shown, I think it was shown on the 7th of February, 94. But, lo and behold, they were puzzled and surprised at all these skeptics writing to them saying, you know, it should never have been shown and so forth. So, they were approached by a production company to say, well, why don't we do a review of this? You know? And they did. And this was the progress. But, I don't know whether they were aware or the producers conned them into this, but to employ, not just Ed Krupp, by the way. They employed at least 2 CSICOP members. There was another fellow called Ken Feder, I think he was called, Ken Feder, who was an anthropologist. He was very nasty to Graham Hancock. And he was, you know, just Google him. I mean, this guy is an ultra skeptic, to say the least. So, you know, the BBC must have been aware that they were bringing in you know, I suppose it's like bringing Osama bin Laden to criticize the White House, you know. It just won't work. You know, they must have been aware. They must have been aware.
But Robert, going back to Edwin Krupp, I mean, he must have been pretty embarrassed about the whole thing, back in the Horizon scandal.
I don't know if he was embarrassed. I mean, he did his job, I suppose. His job was to debunk, no matter what, and he did it, you know. And, but, you know, I keep saying, I mean, I'm sure he's convinced that he's right. I mean, I'm sure he is convinced of that. I mean, you can't talk to, it's a bit like talking to the Pope in the Middle Ages, you know. I mean, you're wasting your time. I mean, they believe they're right.
It's extremism. It is extremism in a scientific sense.
Yeah. Well,
do you think
let him come out again? You know, I think I would enjoy another.
I just find it bizarre. You know, I think this like in a very simple view sometimes, and I know it's not simple, Robert. I know. Well, it's simple if you look at the psychology, but I just think it's crazy that Edwin Krupp's coming back on the universe, having another go at this. But like you say, it's
okay. Let me wrap it up with this. Because this is the right way to wrap it up. In 3 weeks' time, I'll be going to Stuttgart.
We might see you there. I might see you there for
yes. As you know, I'm attending the birthday party of Eric von Däniken.
Yes.
You know, the big naughty boy of the academics. I mean, he's the one, right?
Sure.
And there will be many attendees. There's Graham Hancock and many other writers. And there's going to be Chandra Wickramasinghe, by the way, the famous astrophysicist as well, and probably others. I have no problem with Eric von Däniken. I've known Eric von Däniken for years. He knows I do not agree with much of his contentions. I mean, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be insulting to him or unfairly attack him. I mean, yes, you can criticize him. There's no problem. He expects this, but believe me, what we went through is only half of what he went through. I mean, he was brought to trial on tax frauds, you know, on false accusations. He went through the whole thing. He had to face even the Inquisition. You know, the Catholic Church went very crazy about this and wanted to excommunicate him and so forth. This is nonsense. We're not in the Middle Ages. I mean, you know, and after all, let me say this because it has to be said. You know, although I don't agree with his approach, he might have gone far too far in arguing his case for alien visits in the past. But for all we know, he might be right. I mean, who are we to tell? You know, we live on a planet that has existed for 4.5 billion years. We are in a universe that has existed for 12 billion years. We're newcomers here. I mean, we don't know what happened in these billions of years, let alone outside our galactic system. Mm-hmm. So it is a mistake to try and block all this. As long as it's discussed intelligently, as long as it is reviewed properly, it's okay. It's okay. We don't need the Church of Progress to call hereticism every time there is somebody who talks about this. Sure. I'm okay with this, you know, and everybody should be okay with this, you know. So this is what I'm telling Dr. Krupp and his colleagues at CSICOP. Yeah. You know, it's not your job. You're not the custodians of knowledge. You're not the masters of the universe deciding what is right and wrong. Mm-hmm. I agree that one should properly review any theory, and if it is falsifiable, well, so be it. Let it be falsified, but not in the way they've been doing it. So well, that's it.
Hopefully we get some vindication. Yeah, you know, Robert, hopefully we get vindication for these two astronomers and they get their paper published. That's the most important thing of all of this, what we're talking about today.
I think they will. I mean, they're determined, so let's wait. But I think they will.
For sure. Well, just for the listeners, I've got a Capricorn Radio TV interview coming up with Mr. Von Daniken. That's coming up very, very soon. And I may have an interview with you, Robert, in Stuttgart, a TV interview. We'll see how we go with that. Be nice to do another TV interview again. But for the now, Robert, it's been great talking to you. It really has. And, you know, I love what you do, Robert. You know that, because I know there's a lot goes on behind the scenes, and you're always fighting for the little guy, and you're always fighting for the truth, and you still do what you do, Robert. You know, you're a veteran, as I say, Robert, for this stuff. But
speaking of a veteran, I mean, Daniken is one of the probably original veterans in this business. He wrote his book, Chariot of a God, in 1969, I think. I was a kid in those days. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you this, because I got to know Daniken personally in 1993. I was about to publish the Orion Mystery, and he got to know of the book through Bertelsmann, his publisher, where my agent had sent my manuscript to Bertelsmann, and he got a whiff of it. And he called me up. He called me up and said, "Hey, why don't you come and visit me?" So I thought, okay. And I remember I went there with my colleague Adrian Gilbert. Mm-hmm. And I expected the worst. I thought, you know, I mean, what is he going to turn out to be? You know, I thought a little man with a television antenna on his head or something like that. You know? And I remember so well, he opened the door of his very nice house in Solothurn, lived in Switzerland. And he was very enthusiastic. He said, wait, you know. So there we stood outside the door, and he rushed upstairs. And while he came down the stairs, he was carrying a book, and he said, now they're coming, you know. So I thought, well, no, look, my Orion theory doesn't mean they're coming, you know, the aliens. But he said, no, I want to give you this book. Robert, you need this book. And the book has a very unusual title. I have it to this day. In fact, it's gone in the hands of Hancock and others. It's called The Experts Speak.
Wow.
And it's written by two journalists, Christopher Cerf and Victor Navasky of New York. And they founded, believe it or not, something called the Institute of Expertology. And this book is something that everybody should have. It's a huge compendium of authoritative misinformation. And it goes through all of history of how experts had it wrong. You know, going from people saying, you know, that the earth was flat, and there's gems in there.
It's like a compendium of the experts getting it wrong then.
Yeah, there's a famous one I love. And to me it's the best one. It's because I'm in publishing. I don't know if you remember the author, the great explorer, Thor Heyerdahl.
Thor Heyerdahl, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a Contiki Expedition, first edition on my shelf there, Robert.
You do?
I do.
Well, I might be throwing names again, but I met Thor Heyerdahl with Graham Hancock, by the way. We met him in Tenerife in the early 2000. Wow. Unfortunately, 3-4 years before he died. Mm-hmm. And anyway, Thor Heyerdahl is in this book. He's in this Expert Speaks. And when he wanted to publish the Kon-Tiki expedition, which was a very, very daring expedition, a real scientific attempt to prove that the ancients had crossed the Pacific, he was rejected, believe it or not, by 40 publishers. So finally, he asked his agent, he says, "Tell me the truth. I mean, what are they saying? I mean, why are they rejecting it?" And he said, "Look, do you really want to know?" So I said, "Yeah, tell me." And I'm paraphrasing him, because I can't find the page to quote it. But the agent said, "Well, the publishers are saying, who wants to know about a bunch of Scandinavians floating on a raft?" And he said, "Is that what they think?" And anyway, they were absolutely wrong. I mean, all these expert publishers and agents, they were wrong. The book eventually got published, and it was in the charts. It was the #1 bestseller in the New York Times for 29 weeks.
Yeah.
In fact, it sold more than the Bible at the time. So the point is, experts can and will be wrong many times.
I got a first edition in a market in London, Robert, for £2. I found the first edition. I couldn't believe it, Robert, when I found it. It was like a lovely hardcover as well.
Well, you're not going to like this, but I have a signed copy. Anyway, the point is that I want to tell the public at large that, it's enough. We're no more in those Middle Ages or times where experts, because they wear a white gown, and make statements that they are right. They have been notoriously wrong on many issues, like the Wright brothers people will never fly and that sort of stuff. Or the best one, the captain of the Titanic saying, "This ship will never sink," Things like that. Sure. Experts can be wrong.
Yep.
And let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
I truly believe that experts in astrology have been wrong. We're dealing with something else here. We're dealing with a much more sophisticated culture that long predates the chronology that they assume it to be, and that this will sooner or later come out to be proven and understood. These theories are the beginning, just the beginning. Sure. Okay, James.
Well, it's been wonderful talking again, Robert. I hope to see you.
Always good to talk to you. Yes.
Yeah, you too. I hope to see you in Stuttgart for a TV interview. In the meantime, Robert, I'm always interested to hear what's happening with the developments in your latest book, and can't wait for Yourself in Shock to come out on this forthcoming book. It's going to be really exciting. I'm all attention on that, Robert. But for now, great talking to you again, Robert.
Great. Pleasure.